Okay, thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon for our quarterly cat volunteer meeting. We have a relatively informal program for us today. This is meant to be a little more of a town hall format where we're just going to check in, see how everybody's doing, take your temperature on the goings on, given that it is the peak season for cat population as well as dogs. I have a few minor touch points here just to go over, but it's a short bulleted list before we're going to get into more of an active discussion. You can feel free to toss any questions in the chat. Jen is going to be watching that window and monitoring for us. And then once we get to the discussion portion of things, we'll probably ask you to use the raise your hand function so we can call on you if you'd like to say something on the call rather than in the chat. So first up is just one larger update from my conversations with the shelter medicine team recently. We have a lot of cats that are sick, upper respiratory infections. There is a little bit of panleukopenia. It is the peak season. It is when these diseases are spreading around the fastest. They are the biggest concern that they're going to be throughout the year. So they've asked us to just help them out by sort of narrowing our roles a little bit. So for everyone that does cat positive start, that's going to mean focusing on socialization. I know that we come in, those 10 to 12 shifts, you're landing right in the middle of morning cleaning. There's still a lot to be done. Everyone wants to help. You're all fantastic helpers. We appreciate you deeply for that. But there's a lot of movement, especially in owned cats lately. There's a lot of cats that need special attention, and there's a lot of cats for whom we are using what we call monitor sheets. Those are just little laminated half sheets where we are tracking something: appetite, waste production, symptoms of upper respiratory infection. So if we go in and we grab up a food bowl or a litter pan to change it out before a staff member has gotten to it, we may be tossing out valuable data. That poop is valuable data sometimes, depending on what the cat is going through. So if you are signed up for cat positive start, please just isolate your activities a little bit to the socialization of the cats themselves. The staff will get through the cleaning. I promise you, it is getting done every day, but it is taking just a little bit longer because they have to be a little bit more intentional and careful with these guys and fill out those monitor sheets to make sure we're tracking their health a little bit more diligently than we do with, your average healthy cat. Now, I know that you all would still like to help with the morning cleaning. If you would like to do so, I just ask that you sign up for shelter care with cats. Shelter care goes from 8:45 to 11:45 every morning. It's available 7 days a week. And that is the role where you can focus on helping with the morning cleaning, helping with the feeding. The staff can teach you more in depth about what they're doing as you're doing it alongside them. And that'll give you that chance to help in a different way. But by selecting one or the other, we're just going to keep a really clear, defined line between those roles so that everyone can get things done as efficiently as possible and we can collect the data that we need from these cats with accuracy. Jen, do you have anything you want to add to that?
No, I think you did a great job. And just a question for you. Do you want to hold questions to the end or do you want to do questions in between since we have a small group? What do you think?
I think we got a small group. We got time. If there's a question I can answer while we're on topic, I'd love to.
Yeah, so before we move into that to a different topic, that's a new change. Are there any questions about that? If you want to either raise your hand and come off mute or message in the chat, I can read those questions out loud.
Okay, it's Cliff. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you, Cliff. What you got?
Well, we understand the situation regarding who should be doing the cleaning of the cages on a regular basis, both time and the content of the cleaning or what has to be cleaned. And there's been many occasions where the current staff, not volunteers, are just inundated with the task of trying to get these cages in a clean enough condition, once a day, let alone any more than that. So when we walk in there as volunteers and see these guys struggling, it's natural for us to jump in and help them. On the flip side, if we want to continue to just focus clearly on the cats as far as socialization, then trying to do that in and around the cage when people are trying to get cleaned up is difficult. And the facility doesn't really allow itself, like in Cats 1, where we've got those rooms, separate rooms, where we can take cats in there and really find out what they're doing in terms of playing and trying to break down any barriers between the cat and the humans. And we don't have that over in Cats 2. All we have potentially is the caged areas that don't have that gap under the cage to the floor. And you can shut the door and let them run around, but I don't know if that's really what we should be doing. So just working with the cats through a cage door is a bit of a challenge, and it's difficult to get some good results.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Thank you, Cliff, for raising that question, bringing that point up. So Cal and I did talk a little bit about this before the meeting, and this is something we can put out to you guys because we'd like your thoughts, your opinions on this. We did talk about perhaps during the busiest times of year, like right now when we are at capacity, perhaps it makes sense to make some changes to the Positive Start socialization role to the shift times. And having those start a little bit later after the cleaning, and then, having the shelter care roles, right? They're the earlier roles where we can move through it. And maybe, there are changes where we need a double shelter care role. One starts in the morning, and if someone doesn't want to stay that whole time, maybe there's a second shift there. So of course we'll need some feedback from staff as well, but that's a potential option right there. If there isn't enough room to move around back and forth while people are cleaning, and that's kind of why Positive Start, has turned into cleaning for level 2, is because it's just too hard to socialize while cleaning is going on. The shifts can be adjusted. We did make that change before for our dog Positive Start role, and separated out. And that's something that we could do as well for Positive Start. So I don't know if that sounds like a potential option, or if there's any other level 2 volunteers here. I know Natalie, you're on this call too. If you have any thoughts there. And again, before we, make changes to the shift, this is something that we can put out to poll, because I know that everyone is not in this meeting currently. So that is something we could do, is we can send out a poll where we get feedback from everyone. There's a certain time frame that people can, say what they think about this potential change and go from there. But we definitely need to kind of separate the two, separate cleaning and socialization. From as far as what volunteer duties are, just to make sure that we're getting that information that we need. And yeah, staff still want the help. It's just we want to make sure that everyone has the appropriate tools and training, and that's their sole focus, and not being split between both trying to do cleaning and socialization at the same time. So Natalie asked the question, are they really going to be able to clean by 11? So I think what Natalie's saying, are we going to be finished cleaning by 11? It's a great question. Probably not at this time of year, not for all cat sections. So again, that's something that we can work through. That's just why we're bringing this to the meeting. Cliff, I don't know if there's anything you want to add after I, said what I said.
No, it's just that I don't know if anybody else has got anything to say regarding the socialization of the cats in the cage environment, out the cage environment. And obviously when there's some medical concerns going around, how much we should physically have contact with the cat so as not to potentially spread anything to others. And it's going to be easier without that cleaning taking place at the same time. But maybe we need to talk about the actual socialization facility and whether we can have an area that we can take the cats in and have a greater contact than just through a cage door.
Yeah. I think you bring up a good point. It could be better for the animals health wise, right? If we make that separation, and that's kind of what we're thinking too, and one of the reasons for bringing up this change. I don't think we'll be able to solve for another space for out of cage time for fat cats or level 2 positive start right now, but that's definitely something we can bring to the table and try to work on as a potential option. So there's one other thing I want to read in the chat here from Brian Howell. When I was trained, we used the blue gowns and gloves, PPE and stuff. Is there any talk about bringing this back due to things going around? So that's a great question. Do you want to take that one, Kellen?
Yeah, I actually just had a conversation with Dr. Garrity, our shelter veterinarian, today about PPE. So to give you guys some transparency about just where we're at, we do have a couple of rooms that have confirmed Panleukopenia cases. They are under quarantine. So those are already, I think it's room T currently in owned cats is under quarantine for that purpose. So there's currently no activity in there other than staff doing basic cleaning and, you know, just isolating those animals. The concern, of course, is always transmission and carrying, you know, these illnesses from one room to another. After speaking with Dr. Garrity, she does feel that it's appropriate to sort of step up our PPE use to where we are using gloves with every cat and we're washing our hands and, you know, forearms essentially very thoroughly between socialization. Now with kittens, with unvaccinated or immune compromised cats, like those with FIV, feline immunodeficiency virus, or feline leukemia virus, you may want to step up and add an isolation gown, or even with any cat with whom you want just a lot of body time, a lot of close snuggling. She is recommending that we do that, but currently we're not going to ask that everybody use a gown every time. We go through them very quickly that way, and they are a relatively more difficult resource to renew. We got a huge donation last year that I think we're still working on. It was an enormous pallet of gowns, but they are used for many purposes throughout the shelter. And the more we can preserve them for things like surgeries or care in the ringworm quarantine room, you know, the better, the more we can stretch that resource. So for now, we would like everybody to use gloves, and we'd like you to wash up really thoroughly between socialization sessions with cats. Add a gown if you really want to snuggle up close and have them sitting on you and rubbing all over your shoulders and torso and lap. But that's where we're at the moment. I can't promise that it won't change again. Of course, we will respond to changing circumstances if the concern rises or if we step down in concern level here. So just look for communication to come directly from me about that. I will probably send an email, that'll include that information after we've wrapped up here today, because I do want the population at large to know that we'd like you to be using gloves as your default. But right now, no gowns. I know they get really hot. It's July. Those rooms have big glass windows that transmit a lot of heat into the interior. So we don't need to sweat under gowns for the moment.
Kellen, can you confirm, is that the same for each role? Is it the same gloves between each cage, new gloves between each cage for both cats 1, cats 2? By cats, I mean positive start 1, positive start 2, and shelter care?
Yes, it is the same. So you're changing it out between every kennel. If you have multiple animals in the same kennel, you can consider them one sort of unit, right? It doesn't hurt, of course, to still wash up before you exchange one kitten in the kennel for another. But right now, just change your gloves from kennel to kennel and wash up really good.
Okay. Any other questions before we move on to the next item we have on the docket?
And just to add a little bit at the end there, I know we talked about disease transmission being a concern, and I know not everybody that might view the recording has gone through our virtual with the vet sessions or humane communities from last year. So the way mainly that we transmit diseases throughout an animal shelter is on our bodies, on ourselves, our clothing, our skin. We are fomites upon which a virus or a germ may attach itself and then be transmitted onto the animal. That works the same way for just about everything. FIV, FELV can be put onto the skin, but they are an extremely low transmission risk from human to cat. FIV especially. FIV is bites, right? We exchange bodily fluids by mixing saliva into the bloodstream when a cat bites another. Feline leukemia can be picked up surface to surface. Cats do a lot of nose-to-nose greetings. That's where it's commonly transmitted among infected and non-infected or non-protected cats. But we just really want to be mindful of our bodies for that reason, because anywhere an animal touches us, they are depositing whatever germs they are carrying. If there is a virus, if there's a bacterium in there, they are putting it on us wherever they touch. So when we're mindful of that, we can have a pretty good idea of just what our risk is to both ourselves and the cats, as well as our animals at home, right? We always want to be mindful of whether or not we are, potentially taking something home with us. So that's where I'm, really want to lean into encouraging stepping up your PPE use if you have a concern. If you're in doubt, it doesn't hurt to add a gown to those gloves.
Thank you, Kellen.
Okay. One other brief reminder that I have for everyone. Now, this is not me asking everyone to go and start using it right away, just so that you can fill it up, but it is just a reminder to everyone, the behavior concern binder up at the volunteer station where you sign in, that can be used for cats as well. If you have a concern with a cat's behavior, when you are socializing with them or you observe something odd when you're doing cat shelter care, you can put it in there and let the team know so that we can take a look at that animal and see if any response is necessary or what we can do to help them. Because usually what you're going to be identifying is heightened stress, heightened fear or overstimulation, and there are ways to address that. So if you feel as though you've learned something new behaviorally about the cat you just worked with, or if that cat gives you a little bit of grief or trouble, you can use that binder to get a message basically to the volunteer team, to the behavior team, to the shelter med team, so that we can respond. Have any more? It looks like the chat is going off.
We do have one other question. It's from Natalie. She says, we are no longer testing for feline leukemia or FIV, correct? That's correct. And I feel like my brain is going to be a little fuzzy here, but we actually haven't been testing for FIV, correct, for a very long time. Am I saying that right? You want to take this one?
I think we stopped testing for FIV in 2015. We do test when we see the common concurrent symptoms or we have any other reason to suspect that the animal may be infected with FIV or feline leukemia. And adopters are offered the opportunity at adoption to get a combo test done for both of those diseases at a reduced cost at the time of adoption. So no, we're not testing everyone as a standard operating procedure, but we are still catching a majority, most of these cases. The ones that we may miss are the ones that are not showing any symptoms. They're not giving us any reason to believe that they may be infected. And it's also important to remember that these diseases affect roughly only 3% of the adult, or rather, I should say just the cat population in the United States. Diane, you have a question?
So the room, for example, now that's quarantined in own cats, and there have been however many instances of whatever is going on. Are all the cats tested in that room if one cat shows symptoms, or do you still follow that same protocol even though one has tested for whatever it is in that room?
So questions about quarantine protocols, whether we're testing everybody for the illness that we identify in quarantine. So for things like feline leukemia or FIV, not necessarily, right? They are transmitted by very direct close contact to an animal. And so it's not extremely likely that a cat in the next shoreline kennel over is going to get any kind of meaningful exposure. For things like Panleukopenia, we're definitely going to keep an eye on the rest of the room. If we're able to, we may move some healthy cats out, though that is risky because we don't know necessarily when the symptoms broke or when the exposure truly happened to the infected animal. So you may see that occasionally healthy cats are going to stay in place in a room where there is a Panleukopenia or upper respiratory quarantine. We will watch those animals, of course, very carefully and very closely for any development of symptoms at that point, and then begin treatment and respond accordingly.
Yeah, the DVM does make she'll go in, I say she, we have a but Dr. Garrity, she'll go in and she'll make a determination. Usually she's looking at the age groups. Are there any symptoms? So there's a couple of things that go in it that determine the length of a quarantine. So it might not be the same every single time, but yeah, we do not test unless we're seeing symptoms. A lot of viruses, not all, but Panleuk, in the case of that virus, you can't like proactively catch it. You can only test it once they're symptomatic. So if they show symptoms, then they're tested.
But great question. Thank you. Okay. Well, that gets us through all of my prepared remarks. What I'd like to do now is open it up for some discussion, and I'd really like to hear about how it's going. So I'm going to prompt you in a couple of different ways here. Who's got something to say or a story to tell about something that went really, really well in CAP Positive Start, or a meaningful, memorable interaction that you had, or an outcome that was particularly happy and fulfilling for you? No wrong answers here. What made you feel good about CAP Positive Start since we saw you last in the quarterly meeting?
Anybody?
We'll give our typers a moment. If anyone wants to raise their hands to speak on microphone, you can do that as well.
Yeah, this is Brian. You guys hear me?
We can hear
Yes, we
you,
can.
Brian.
Yeah, well, actually, mine is actually a failure because I've been positive cat start for, I don't know, like 8 months now. And I have cats at home. And so my idea was to go in and I could get my kitty fix, my additional kitty fix when I went in. And 3 days ago, I completely failed and adopted Jill. So, yeah, so I got her home. She had a little eye infection going on. She had the upper respiratory. Um, but yeah, and I didn't know that actually you get a free adoption one per year. So yeah, so don't do that anymore. And don't feel like me. I guess my other question too, while I have you on the mic, is the level 2. Is that with cats that aren't adoptable yet?
Yes, so that is the unevaluated cats. So you would be socializing with the cats that are still somewhere within the process of being evaluated and treated, or just prepared for adoption. They're not quite ready yet. They may still be on a stray animal hold. They may still be actively ill or injured and recovering. There may be any number of things preventing them just yet from making it to the adoption floor, but they need socialization just as bad as those adoptable guys do. In fact, probably a little more, because it's stressful to be in the back of house. It's stressful to go through that vetting process and get prepared for adoption. So the more they can get friendly faces back there to help them take the edge off a little bit, the better.
Okay, maybe that's a better fit for me, and then I can't adopt one. So anyway,
There you go. Well, thank you for sharing the story. Really, I'm very glad to hear that you've made a new connection since starting up here. And I do appreciate you updating me about the free adoption. I wasn't sure we were still honoring that.
yeah, I was shocked. I went up and I'm like, I failed, and how much do I owe you? And they're like, oh, it's free. I'm like, what? So yeah, actually, I made a like, what's my volunteer discount? And they said free, and I thought she was joking with me. So anyway,
Well, I think it's supposed to be 50% off, so I think you got a
Oh.
special deal.
I'm going back on mute now. Sorry, I didn't say anything. Bye.
Oh, no, you're fine. And I'm gonna say, I don't know that it's a fail. A kitty found a home, a good home.
Exactly. That's a
So,
victory in my
yeah,
book.
we got to celebrate all the successes in animal welfare. So,
Absolutely. In fact, I can tell you guys an anecdote from my last job in animal welfare years ago now. Anytime a foster family at my previous organization decided to hold on to their pet, the common term that we use is foster fail, right? It's a fun little joke. But we had a manager that was really, really into changing the culture and making things real positive. She's one of the reasons that you'll hear me say feed two birds with one stone instead of the other way that we phrase that idiom. But she really wanted to change the way that we looked at those outcomes. And so she started demanding that we all call them foster wins. It is a win, right? Because that animal got a home. we'll deal with the fact that that foster home maybe can't take on another animal in the future later on, but it's a win, right? You have a new animal, that animal has a new home. It's a happy outcome for everybody. So I'll be
I like
overjoyed for everybody else trading that term around. Foster win is what we like to
like
say.
that. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Who else has got something for us? Something positive and fulfilling or enjoyable that you got to do or that happened recently?
I passed out brown paper bags to some of the cats a couple of days ago for some enrichment, and it was really, really fun. We got them from Sunrise Senior Living in Northville. One of our volunteers went and took her alum dog Gracie to collect the supplies and participate in their Dog Days of Summer event that they held for the seniors. So Gracie got to meet all the seniors and they got to get their lovin's in. And then we got to get some stuff for the shelter animals. So they gave us some treats, was really nice because I know we can use those for enrichment. And I put brown paper bags on the list as items that we could use. And they were like bigger sized ones, not the little brown paper lunch bags that we use for the dog treats. So I was like, you know what? Yes, this is a score. We got some for cats. We need more cat enrichment. So we just took off the handles, and our intern Katie came with me, and Diane was actually there too. She's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, well, and so everybody was kind of checking out the bags and going into them. And I went back at the end of the day and most of the bags were squished, but I'm going to take that as a win too, because that means they were investigating them and enjoying the crinkly sounds and sleeping in them. So just going to throw that out there. If you got old paper bags from the grocery store or from your takeout, bring those in. You can pass those out too. I know some of the level 2 kitties might be a little too scared. I try to pass out a couple back there, and I think I picked the wrong kitty, but definitely the adoptables really, really enjoyed it. And those are items that we can either keep in one of the cubbies where the enrichment supplies are, or we can store them in the enrichment room and you guys can check that out. Or just bring them in with your shift and use them however you see fit. And if you have questions about how to use them or what we're talking about, I did take a picture. I wanted one with a cat in the bag so badly, but I didn't think of it soon enough. So I have a picture of a cat walking next to the bag and just a picture of the bag. And I was going to share that in the newsletter and probably on social to like encourage other people to do that. So yeah, that was fun.
Fantastic. My own little brief story is just this morning on morning rounds, Madison, one of our animal care managers, was checking out the cleaning job in adoptable cats in the front cat colonies. Our overstimulated spicy gal Robin's egg was just moved into one of the front cat colonies. She darted out of the door from colony number 1, right past Madison, and sauntered her way into my office. And then she was an absolute sweetie about getting put back in the colony. So having that extra space looks like it may really be helping her be a little bit less stressed and take it a little easier. So that's another positive thing that I can share. It looks like we also got one from Natalie. There's no such thing as a free kitty. Lima Bean is a cuddle bug now. I know Natalie did take home a new family member relatively recently. So glad to hear that that's going well. So very glad. And Keela, it's been a few weeks since I've been with the kitties, but every time I'm there, I really enjoy giving scritches and scratches and hearing each of their purrs. Absolutely. That's what it's all about. Getting friendly, fun time and making pals with these little guys.
Okay, does anybody else want to share anything? Give it a second in the chat. Anyone come off mute?
I see no raised hands or anything.
Mike's
So
good.
what about what's not working? I'm assuming if not everybody had something positive to share, does everybody else who didn't share something positive have some feedback about what's not going well? Is there anything itching your brains or lingering in the back of your minds or just kind of making it a little less than ideal to work in Cat Positive Start right now? Other than the tremendously huge cat population. I know that's always a concern this time of year.
Any stressors or pain points? Or we can go back into some more about the changes.
I think we touched on some of this Kellen, in that start of this meeting where we went through maybe a little bit of frustration regarding cleaning, who should clean, and clashing with trying to socialize cats. So we've touched on it. That would be my sort of slight negative where we are at the moment. But it looks like we could make a few changes for the better for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally understandable. It's, you know, it's a full up shelter and there's a lot of cats that need a lot of attention. And it's easy to feel like we're kind of getting in each other's way when we're back there, you know, trying to move, make things happen, get the place clean, get these guys comfortable again. So yeah, completely understandable that you might encounter some frustration with just sort of feeling like you're all trying to operate and do all sorts of conflicting and clashing things within the same space there. I'm hopeful that some of the changes we talked about so far can help alleviate a little bit of that, issue for us. But I will encourage everybody, you know, we're going to send out a survey after the fact. I am always reachable directly by email. The survey is anonymous. If you have other ideas or suggestions or concerns that you want to make me aware of, but you would rather not have your name attached, that's totally fine. There will also be an option in the survey to add your contact information if you would like me to follow up on your suggestion or concern or question. So I'm hoping that, and of course, the more we continue these quarterlies in this format, I'm hoping we can get everybody real just comfortable and excited to share ideas and concerns, because we're all here to do the same thing, which is help these guys. And my job is to make that as comfortable and pain-free for you all while you're here giving us your time.
One other thing I have an issue with when I start the shift and walk into that Cats 2 area, let's say without any cleaning activities going on, it's how much time can you or should we dedicate to individual cat or kittens? Because all the cages are full and you look around, oh my God, you know, I really want to put something positive into this cat or this kitten, but at the loss of that activity taking place with other cats and kittens, and only being there, in my case, for 2 hours a shift. It's just a little bit frustrating to know where to put your energies for the benefit of the cat or kitten.
Absolutely, I totally understand that. So when we are choosing how to allocate our time, especially in cat positive start, there are a lot of animals, and unless we are in the dead of winter with the lowest population of the year, we're at the absolute floor, there's typically going to be more cats than you can socialize with reasonably. So the ceiling is already way up here, right? We're reaching for somewhere that we're not necessarily going to be able to get in your average 2-hour length shift. And so the thing that I really love to do when someone brings me this question is refer back to what you might know as the parable of the starfish. I know some folks may be familiar with it, some folks may not be. It's the broad strokes, the short version of the story is that a little girl notices that a big high tide has washed up a bunch of starfish on the shore of the ocean. She walks down to the beach and starts tossing them back in the water to protect them because she knows they're going to dry out in the sun if they stay there too long. A gentleman drives by and looks out his window and says, "Little girl, what are you doing?" She says, "I'm helping these starfish get back into the ocean to protect them from the sun." And he says, "Well, you'll never possibly get to them all in time. There's starfish for miles down the beach. You can't possibly make a difference for every single starfish." And she picks one up and she throws it back in the ocean and she says, "I did for that one." So my answer to you is, it is always going to be a bigger task than one of us alone can handle. And so the best thing that you can do with your time is make choices about who to socialize with, and then make sure that that cat that you've chosen has a really great experience. You can end your shift then at the end of those 2 hours, knowing that you've done your best for everyone that you can get to, and that the rest will get someone else's attention, or they'll get some attention. You're not alone, right? We have a ton of people on this call tonight, even more out there in the ether that are not joining us at the moment. So there is a lot of participation. Other volunteers, other staff will get to these animals and will give them attention. So your role, I really want you to focus on selecting the ones that you feel a connection or feel like you can really make a difference for them. Maybe you see that There's 3 kennels full of really little kittens that are screaming and meowing and pawing out the cage door at you and saying, I want this attention so bad. But then there's that one little guy in the 4th shoreline at the end who's maybe a little bit scared, but he looks kind of curious. And that's a guy you can help come out of his shell, right? Those little kittens, they're maybe blank slates, they're sociable. They're going to be easy, to get up to speed because they got a lot of development time in front of them. Maybe you can go help that teenage cat, that one who's 8 or 9 months old and hasn't had that young socialization to really get accustomed to people and see us as friendly helpers, So choosing where you offer is really
One
important.
other problem is,
Yeah.
not problem, it's an opportunity that when you have a shift change and assume there are volunteers coming on, which I haven't seen in the shift period of 10 to 12, other than Natalie and I sort of buddy up, if you like, and try to get as much done as we can, is how to communicate with the next shift what you've done, what you've achieved for that individual cat, because you never know what's been going on. There's no method of communicating to the people coming on the next shift.
That's true. That is true. We don't currently have any tracking infrastructure in the same way that we do for dog positive start. There's a big whiteboard where they can mark off, hey, I've walked this dog. This dog went into the PEC with me. I sat with this dog, so that other volunteers know when they come in who they can start with. The answer I have to that is that there are a lot of cats. And anytime we're talking about a process like this to track this info and to trade this info, we're talking about a tool that needs to be built in the first place and then kept up and maintained. And this would primarily be a volunteer tool. So what I'd like to do is actually include a question about that in our post hoc survey here. I will include one about how does everybody feel about a tracker for cat socialization, with the knowledge in mind that this would be primarily a tool that you, the volunteers, are going to maintain and use to exchange information.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I can think of one of the rooms where there's a whiteboard currently and it's not being used, so that could be something. I mean, I don't see it as being mandatory because the way we try to encourage people to go about this is each person needs to choose the cats that they work with based on their skill set and who they feel comfortable working with, who they think is going to make whatever animal is going to be most meaningful to them. So I know, Cliff, what drives you is, well, I want to help as many as I can. I want to make sure all of them get a little something. And that's a good motivator for you. That fulfills you, that fills your cup, but that might not be how someone else perceives the role. They might go to a cat that maybe not everyone has a skill set to work with. There could be some people who are newer and, ooh, that cat, I don't know what that means. I'm going to avoid someone who looks fearful, or I'm going to avoid someone who looks overstimulated. My preference is kittens, right? We want to respect that. And it's good to have that flexibility because everyone is going to have different motivators and different things that are meaningful to them. And every cat is going to respond differently to every person. So it's not so much like check off everybody in the room. I mean, that definitely can be something that you want to do. And again, we can create a tool for the folks that want to do that. But it doesn't have to be. It really is supposed to be fun. Just come out and hang out with the kitties. I know it's a little bit different in the back because there's more of them. But I think that we could still come up with some sort of method for the folks that do want to communicate and know, like, hey, who did what? Who's got progress? I mean, at one point we used to have forms where people could actually fill out, like document, like little paragraphs about what they did with each cat and how they've interacted and changed from week to week. That is potentially something we could bring back if volunteers felt that were valuable. So there's a lot of options, and I definitely think like putting out some surveys to the whole population is a way we can kind of get the conversation going and share that information. It'll probably take us a little bit to put that together because as these questions come up during the meeting, we'll know what we want to poll the population of volunteers, and get your feedback. So we'll probably send out the initial survey and then a second survey with all of those questions a little bit later on so we can start making some progress. But these are all really great things.
Yeah, I see a great suggestion from the chat, maybe something on the kennel to let us know who has gotten some face time. That's a good idea. That's certainly something, again, to keep that in mind, include it when we send out the survey to check on how everybody feels. But there are quite a few different ways that I'm sure we can come up with to record that information. And then it's just going to be up to the population and the volunteer team to collaborate here and decide on what we really feel like is going to be both effective and useful to you all. Because again, it's a tool to be maintained. It's a tool that is going to use up some of your shift time to maintain it. So, we want to take all of these things into account when we're thinking about how to apply the time spent in the shelter to maximize our impact on the animals.
So there was another comment in the chat from Natalie. When cats are surrounded by squalor, it's really hard to ignore it. And I'm not sure if you're saying, yay, I'm excited that we're going to separate positive start and cleaning, or, oh my gosh, there's no way I can be in a room and ignore it. So please let me clean a litter box. Positive start doesn't mean that you can't help keep the cages tidy. That is definitely part of the position description. Changing out the litter boxes if they're overly soiled, if they spill their water and their blankets are wet, those can be changed out. So you can do that. What we're saying though is if the primary focus, if we're at the time of day where the primary focus needs to be cleaning and making sure we capture the information about how the animal is doing with food and litter, and it's just really important for us to monitor certain things with those animals, that needs to happen at a separate time from a volunteer whose primary role is socialization, right? So, but that doesn't mean that if we finish early in shelter care, that we can't love on the animals. We just need to make sure that we've cleaned all the cages we're going to clean. And that's the primary focus. That doesn't mean, again, if we're in positive start and we see a messy cage that we can't clean it because we only socialize. Nope, that's not what we're saying. We're just saying we want to make sure that there's a main focus for each of those roles. And for positive start, it's socialization. For shelter care, it's cleaning. So I hope that helps, Natalie. I don't know. Again, I don't know exactly how you were intending your comment to land, but, and then Keela, Anna said, yeah, it does. So glad. And then Keela added, another comment. Oh my gosh. My thing is scrolling around. There you go.
Comment is, one time in level 2, there was a kitten whose water bowl was on the top shelf. And I don't think he could reach it, so I moved it down and he started drinking like nobody's business. Thank you for doing that. Definitely a thing to keep an eye out, regardless of the role you're in. If you're doing shelter care or a positive start and it looks like a cat can't get up to where their water bowl is, that's probably more of a concern for the little kittens that don't have the Super Mario jumping power just yet, and can't quite get up to that top shelf. If you need to move a water bowl so that they have access to the water, right, that's role independent. Feel free to grab that and make it accessible to them, of course.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of animals, right? It's easy to forget something. I am guilty of, I'm going to change a litter pan out. I've closed the portal door when we had enough cages to have portal doors open. Right now, I know that that's not a thing in level 2. Most of them are closed. But I would close it, change it, accidentally forget, oh my God, I got to go back and change that. So sometimes folks are going to make mistakes. That's normal. We're all human. If you catch some of that stuff, please feel free to make those changes. If you're seeing it every day, that's a different concern. We can bring that up to the shelter management team and have them do some reminders with staff. But I think just right now, we should expect that a couple of things might fall through the cracks. I mean, there's just a lot of animals that we're caring for. This is one of the hardest times of year for our staff. It's the hardest time of year for you guys as volunteers. There's just a lot of animals. There's a lot of work to do. We could honestly probably work 24/7 if we set to it, but that's not reasonable. So we need to give each other some grace. We need to step in and help each other when we see those things slipping a little bit, and know that resources are limited. So, that's why we encourage, it's not about getting to every cat. It's not about getting to every dish in the laundry station, in case we have any center maintenance people in here, but we talked about that in center maintenance too. It's about doing the best we can. You don't survive in animal welfare for as long as I have, 13 years, if you can't just do the best you can every day and come back and look at each day as a different day. Today, I'm going to do this. Oh, I didn't get to it. That's okay. Tomorrow, I'm going to come in and I'm going to do better. And I'm not saying you guys are going to be here every day. Please don't come every day. That is not good. You guys are volunteers. We only want you here, once or twice a week. But that's the mindset you really want to have. This is mentally and physically exhausting work. Too much of it will drain your cup. And that's not what volunteering is about. It's about having fun and doing something good and adding value, not burning yourself out and making this into a job.
Absolutely. Looks like we've got another question from Natalie. She says, privacy curtains seem like a luxury sometimes. How do we determine when we can make use of another towel? It's a great question. We've been talking a lot about how level 2 cats, especially the owned cats, the unevaluated, that's a higher stress environment for those guys. They haven't been here as long. They haven't had as much time to acclimate. They're still going through things. So having a hiding place is a tremendous tool for them, an asset for them to be able to hide, to get out of visual line of sight from the people and the movement that may be frightening them. So do not ever feel bad about providing a cat with a hiding place with a towel. If you feel like towels are short during your shift any morning, feel free to go check in center maintenance, right? Take a look and see what's on the shelf in there. And if there's not much on the shelf, well, you know what the beauty of things is, that washing machine takes about 55 minutes. So if you wanted to throw in a load of towels, let it run. You've got an hour to go about your business, do other stuff, socialize with other cats, and then you can come back, toss it all into the dryer. It's going to take another 35 or 40 minutes. I'm not sure exactly how long that cycle is. But by the time your shift is over at that point, there are fresh towels ready to go. So no one's going to go short or want for a towel or a blanket. If you're, staying on top of things and just diligent like that, or, just go check, see in the room if all the towel shelves are full of towels, great, grab some, take them in. These are purposes for which we have these supplies, and it is very necessary to these cats to have a hiding place. Really, it's one of the kind of the standards, right? We need them to have food, we need them to have litter, we need them to have water, we need them to have a place to hide from us, to get away from our line of sight.
Yeah, and don't assume just because you come into an area and a cat doesn't have a hide that someone intentionally didn't give them one. I mean, maybe, but there's probably a good reason for it. Maybe we didn't have any clean towels at the time. Maybe the cat was too scared for us to go into the cage. So if you see those privacy curtains like you're talking about, that's where we're hanging it over the door versus going into the cage and giving them a hide. That's a really great tip for cats that are super scared. However, there's a time when a cat is so scared that it's not safe to open the door, right? If they have a note that says, I will bolt, or I'm a bolter, or that cat's so dilated, the pupils are just like really, really, really big, and they're hissing or growling like a caution sign. Those are signs where it just may not be safe. Your safety, a human safety, always comes first. Obviously, we care a lot about the animals, but it's really important to keep ourselves safe. We need to do that first. Then once an animal potentially has a chance to calm down, then we can go back and give a hide. So that could be another reason why staff didn't provide one right away. But volunteers are always welcome and encouraged to provide it as long as it's safe to do so. That's another thing that you guys could easily bring in, and we'll keep putting in the newsletter for people who aren't as familiar with different easy ways that they can help cats or different animals at the shelter. But bring in those cardboard boxes, bring in those paper bags, bring in any used towels that maybe, aren't in perfect condition anymore. Those are all things that we can use for hides. Even little tiny step stools. We've used those before for kittens. So there's a lot of different ways we can get creative with it. But like Helen said, every cat should have a perch and a hide. That's a necessity to make sure that they are, that we're taking care of their mental well-being.
And Natalie says, nice plug about the center maintenance comment. Thank you. I do
Yeah.
love to point folks towards center maintenance.
With a plug, we should also mention that tomorrow, this is good for people in the chat, people watching the recording probably won't get this in time, but tomorrow evening is Virtual with a Vet about Panleukopenia, where we'll be going in more detail about that virus, how volunteers can help prevent the spread, what you guys can do to keep cats safe and healthy. It will also be recorded, so if you can't make it live, don't worry. Even if you do not register for the event, we still share the recording out with the entire volunteer body afterwards via the newsletter and usually on social media. So you'll get it and you can watch it if you choose to. And I recommend it. Dr. Funky is a great source of knowledge and presenter. So
I'll pile another plug on top of that.
look at us
because
go.
We are, again, in the effort to bring more tools and more education, more opportunities to everybody. Late next month, actually, this time next month, August 24th, it's a Saturday, we are going to be holding our first ever session of CAT best practices. It's going to be a virtual session. We are going to have one of our volunteers, Victoria Blaze, joining us. She is a several times over certified CAT behaviorist that has taught all of us a ton already. We're really excited to be able to pass on some of her knowledge. We're going to specifically be addressing CAT overstimulation and making safe choices around CAT socialization, which is a very, very big topic these days with the CAT population being very high. These guys being in close proximity to one another tends to rile them up a bit. Everyone at Berman here, if you've been in CATS 1 in the last 4 months, you know who Robin's Egg is. You know that she has a little bit of a reputation. 2 strokes on the forehead and she's ready to go and snap at you to back you off. So it's a very timely session to talk about overstimulation and how we can choose in a way that maximizes everyone's safety and minimizes risk.
Yeah. All right, we will stop telling you about things you can do. We only have a few more minutes left. So any other questions or ideas that maybe we want to include in that second survey that we talked about, challenges? And again, if you can't think of it today, but you think about it later, or you're not comfortable bringing it up in this setting, remember that survey goes out, or anytime you can send Kellen and I an email or come and talk to us. Even if we can't talk to you in the moment, we can set up a time to chat later, or we can bring it up at the next quarterly. So the idea is to have these every so often, so we get together as a team and we talk about things that have been going well, things that have been challenges, do reminders, talk about protocol changes. It's really another tool, a way to bring us together to make sure we're communicating and in lockstep and doing what we can to the best of our ability to care for the animals. So yeah. Let's see, is there anything else that came through the chat?
We got one more thought from Brian. He said, Robin's Egg, 5 minutes of love and she is done. Yeah,
All caps.
That's pretty much how it goes. And sometimes her fuse is even shorter than that. But we'll be talking about why that is, how we can recognize it and how to respond to it so that everyone is a little bit safer with these action-packed, twitchier guys,
Anybody else?
Good, bad, or indifferent? What do we got?
Okay, that might be it for tonight.
Fair enough.
Oh, wait, I saw something else.
Oh, Natalie asked, when is that discussion? That's going to be August the 24th. That's a Saturday. I will post on our socials and it'll go in the newsletter again. You'll get plenty of messaging to let you know that it's coming up because we want as many folks there as we can get to really make it a success.
Yep. And then just some thanks. Thanks, guys. No, thank you,
Yeah,
really.
Thank you all.
We couldn't have a meeting without you guys being here. So we really appreciate you attending. And for anybody who's going to be watching this recording later, thank you for attending and watching. And you can still fill out the survey, even if you watch at a later date. We'd like your feedback. We want to know how to continue to improve these meetings so you guys get as much value out of them as possible.
Absolutely. The more you guys can add your voice, the more this experience is going to be the way that you want it to be. So I'm available again by email or in person. Come find me. I love getting visitors to my office. I really do. I love having an office. It's my first one ever. I love it when people can come knock on my door and say, hey, you got a minute? You got a minute for me? Of course I do. I love having a minute for people.
He's lucky I don't have an office. I'm his boss and I don't have an office. What? Anyways, all right, guys, thank you so much. Have a great night. We'll talk to you all soon.
Okay, bye.